Hello, this is another one of my videos on resource mobilization and the Babi movement, this one dealing with recruitment and conversion. As with the other videos, it's based on an old article which Moojan, Momen and I wrote back in 1986, entitled The Babi Movement, a Resource Mobilization Perspective. Two general points, as with the other videos. There's still a lot of work to be done in the field of Babi studies. No doubt further research will add to our understanding of this complex movement, and the paper on which these remarks are based is primarily sociological in intent and is using the historical research that was available to us when we wrote the article 35 years ago. So first of all, let's talk about recruitment and conversion in general. Without recruiting new members, religious movements cannot survive over time. Recruitment, however, follows two basic forms: the socialization of the children of movement members and the conversion and re-socialization of outsiders. And in the case of the Babis as an active movement were not around long enough for the first to really apply very much. So we're only concerned with the second form of recruitment. Of course, after Babism was reanimated by Baha'u'llah in the late 1850s, then the socialization of future generations became a major element in the ongoing development of the Babi and then Baha'i communities. According to the resource mobilization perspective, the most salient characteristic in the recruitment of the membership of most social movements is prior social interaction. Contact with a movement is normally assumed to follow from significant interaction with its existing members. Recruitment thus tends to follow pre-existing and positively valued social relationships, whether these are based on ties of kinship, patronage, or vicinal proximity. Conversion occurs as a process of progressive resocialization. The stereotype of a sudden and dramatic personal transformation is not typical. The extent to which this model is applicable to the Babi movement is hard to evaluate. Certainly, there were a number of individual Babis who appear to have undergone sudden transformatory conversions, whether as a result of visions, encounters with the Bab, or perusals of his writings. It may well be, of course, that these conversion accounts were concentrated amongst religious virtuosi who comprised the movement's leading members. On the other hand, that few such accounts are recorded for rank-and-file Babis may simply reflect the sparseness of available historical sources. It is also possible, however, that normal processes of compression and emphasis during oral transmission of conversion accounts have transformed some of them into idealized patterns. So first, the importance of the Sheikhi network. Apart from the dramatic conversions of a number of prominent Babis, the evidence, although scanty, lends support to the use of the mobilization model. Thus, in the first instance, diffusion of the movement was strongly concentrated within the existing network of the Sheikhi communities in Iran and Iraq. Thus, out of 145 conversions of prominent Babis known to have converted prior to 1848, just over half were Sheikhis, whereas of 40 conversions from 1848 or later, only 2 had previously been Sheikhis. The article itself, I should say, includes a table which goes into more detail, which you'd have to consult. Gathered together in Shiraz during the Bab's initial declaration of his mission, the letters of the living dispersed to various parts of Iran, Iraq, and even to India. The initial expansion of the movement resulted from the missionary conversions gained by these disciples. Whether or not the Bab had instructed them to concentrate their energies on the Sheikhi communities, their initial contacts were largely confined to their fellow sectaries. Several of them, notably Mullah Hussein, had already attained some prominence as disciples of Sayyid Kazem and were doubtless able to address their co-religionists with authority, as well as on the basis of sectarian fraternity. Others were sent to their home areas, where they presumably utilized their own existing social networks as a means of diffusing the Bab's message. In some instances, entire local communities of Sheikhis were converted. The main exception to this was Kerman, where Karim Khan Kermani was the leader of the local Sheikhi community and strongly anti-Bābī, and effectively prevented the Bābī missionaries from gaining access to the social networks which were most susceptible to their message. Apart from the Sheikhi network, conversions also occurred following contact with the Bāb himself. Thus, individual Sheikhis who had been particularly impressed by the young merchant when they had met him in Karbala in 1841-42, that is, prior to his putting forward any claim to religious authority, were later amongst the most devoted of his followers. Again, at least 18 Bābīs dated their conversions to their experience of the Bab's public appearance in the Vakil Mosque in Shiraz in 1845, supposedly made to recant his claim. As the Bab's disciples went about their mission, news of the Bab's claim soon began to spread before them. Despite the initial concealment of the Bab's name, the Messianic import of his claim attracted attention well beyond the Sheikhi community. In several instances, individuals set out for Shiraz or some other Bābī missionary center to investigate the matter for themselves. Some were sent as delegates on behalf of others. When such delegates converted, new social networks were opened to Bābī expansion, and further conversions readily followed. Thus, when Sheikh Salman of Hendijan returned to his hometown from Shiraz, he succeeded in converting some 70 families of the Afshar tribe. Again, Mullah Muhammad Farooqi's conversion was important in the expansion of Babism to the Turbat Haydari area of Khorasan. The opening of new social networks was even more effective when leading ulama were involved. Prominent here were these two individuals. Sayyid Yahya Darabi, known as Wahid, abandoned his associations with the court in order to become an itinerant Bābī propagandist, thereafter converting many of those who regarded him or his father as their spiritual guides. His existing networks of contacts in both Yazd and Nayriz, where he had houses, were especially important in this regard. Again, the conversion of Sheikh Muhammad Ali Hajjat Zanjani was followed by the mass conversion of those of the inhabitants of Zanjan who regarded him as their religious leader. In the case of Nayriz and Zanjan, the role of pre-existing social networks in determining conversion patterns depended on more than just relationships of religious patronage and guidance. It was common in mid-19th century Iran for even quite small towns to be divided into a number of mutually antagonistic urban districts, each with its own intense communalism and linkages to the web of patrician politics. The conversion of a religious notable thus favored the conversion of the entire local community to which they were related. Correspondingly, success in one urban district disfavored success in rival districts. Within each town, these districts often coalesced into two competing and largely endogamous urban factions defined in terms of religious labels. Bābī expansion was inevitably molded by these divisions, especially where Sheikhism had become a factional identifier, as in Barfarouche and Qazvin, where all or part of the Sheikhi faction simply converted to the Babi Faith. Even where Sheikhism was not a factional label, support for the Bab was influenced by community divisions. In Shiraz, support came predominantly from the Nemati faction, whilst those within the Haydari faction tended to be opposed, for example. Associational and class networks were also important as channels of Babi expansion. Prominent here were the linkages between the members of the ulama, although the most important formal linkages were between the various leading ulama and between each of these individuals and their own students and the clients of their patronage. The whole body of the ulama represented an informal grouping with considerable intercommunicative potential. Although largely confined to the lower or middle ranks of the ulama, the Babi missionaries were well able to realize this communicative potential, identified as clerics by their distinctive dress and their literacy. With ready access to the network of mosques and colleges, the learned Babis, like other members of the ulama, were able to disseminate new ideas and form new social relationships with their fellows with relative ease. Thus, even at a personal level, the Babi challenge could be directed with particular immediacy to the one social group which was most able to further or to retard the movement's progress. The other associational networks which were important were those of the bazaar. The wholesale merchants were the key figures here. Educated, resourceful, and with a reputation for piety, the merchants enjoyed close association with the upper and middle-ranking ulama. The two groups were also often related by intermarriage and business associations. The Babi ulama were thus able to gain an audience among the merchants. Again, the merchants themselves, by dint of their occupation, had wide-ranging national linkages with their fellow merchants, as well as local contacts with the craftsmen, shopkeepers, and petty traders who, like them, worked in the bazaar. Artisanal and petty bourgeois elements were thus also accessible to the Babi preachers, and in Isfahan at least, the gilded craftsmen of the bazaar became a major network by which the movement spread. We should also mention rural linkages, although these are less clear in the Babi case. Iranian peasants were socially interlinked in a variety of ways, but as yet we have only been able to identify patronage relationships as an evident channel of Babi diffusion. This one factor may well account for the highly uneven expansion of the Babi movement into rural areas, but more research into the role of working and marketing relationships in the rural sector is needed. Kinship linkages as a basis for conversion also need to be researched. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Thank you very much for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without which these videos wouldn't get made. And if you want to support my channel, you're very welcome to do so. Please do like the videos, comment on them, share them, subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll deal with the first of 2 videos on Babi ideology. Have a good day.